We welcome you back to another Bible study here in early April of 2022. It's been about 2 years since we actually began the YouTube channel, and thank you for sticking with us all that time. And obviously there's been a lot of challenging days and just all the issues with COVID and everything, and we've come a long way, really, since then. But it's been a long time since I've given a Bible study here in Mark, and part of it is just, I guess, all the other busyness of different things going on, but also as I was realizing where we're at and recognizing if we hold off just a little bit, then we can sort of cover a little bit of the end of Mark in the appropriate time here as Jesus' death and resurrection are just around the corner for this year when we celebrate again. And so we're just kind of getting back into that right here at the Easter season. We're just heading into that. And so hopefully over the next few weeks, we can just have several of these Bible studies and finish off the book of Mark and our Mark Bible study. So again, thank you for sticking with us during all that time. And I hope that this will be a blessing to you here at the end of Mark. The passage, I think maybe the last one we looked at was in Mark 15, and I had dealt with this issue in verse 10 of how Pilate recognized that they had delivered Jesus to him for envy, and so kind of focused on that a little bit. But just a little further here, as you just kind of continue right on, really, Pilate's wondering, well, should I just go ahead and release Jesus? You know, he normally released a prisoner during this time. And so he thought, well, it'd be a good idea. I'll just go ahead and release Jesus, that is. And instead, the chief priests had moved the people or kind of urged them, let's ask for Barabbas instead. We don't want Jesus to be released. And so when Pilate begins to ask, well, what are we supposed to do with Jesus? Then they would holler out, crucify him. And then, of course, Pilate can't understand their reasoning. This doesn't seem right. What evil hath he done, verse 14. And so rather than give any reason, they didn't really have a good reason, but they just cried louder. And sometimes that does seem to happen. If you don't have a good solid point, just say it louder. And sometimes that's enough to kind of make your point. But then verse 15 is what I want to just share with you in these few moments today as we just sort of get back into it, just very briefly today, but just kind of a little reminder of how far we've come. And then also just kind of getting back to the last couple chapters here. But in verse 15, it says, "And so Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them, and delivered Jesus, when he had scourged him, to be crucified." And what I want us to recognize today is the power of peer pressure. Sometimes it can be a good thing to push people to do the right thing, but many times it's a negative. And in this particular case, Pilate knew very well that Jesus was not guilty of anything worthy of death, and it seemed like he wanted to release him, and actually his wife was apparently supporting that. She didn't want him to have anything to do with Jesus. And so anyway, in the midst of all this, then Pilate, he knows better. But to satisfy the people, he chose otherwise. And I want us to recognize it's so easy for us to try, rather than pleasing Jesus, we try to please the crowd. We try to please other people. We try to make sure they think well of us. We want them to like us and all those things. And it seemed like that must have been Pilate's issue. I know we have all sorts of debates, I suppose, on where Pilate stood. And obviously he could recognize the truth, but he wasn't strong enough to do it, apparently. But just this issue of being willing to content the people is where so many people do the very same thing that Pilate did. And when it seems as though we know better and we ought to always embrace Jesus. In fact, sometimes we'll think about the scripture too, where we're warned that if we are ashamed of him and his words, then he'll be ashamed of us. And we have to be careful that we are willing to go however far it takes in order so that we can go with with Christ and even buck the tide of popular opinion. And so today, just as we sort of get back into this a little bit, I just want to use that verse and just remind us, all the rest of this, obviously, this was God's plan. This is what God intended. It was our hope of salvation, that Jesus would die for us, for the wages of sin is death. And so Jesus had to do it for us. So we recognize that. But there are different points along the way that we see people that even though Jesus was fulfilling the plan of God, the Father, still there were certain people that did the wrong thing. Judas, of course, another one, and even Peter's denial. We have Pilate right here. Just several different examples like this. But I want us to recognize how urgent it is for us to be sure that we are going with Christ, and whatever it costs us, we choose to love and serve Him. Well, God bless you. We'll hope to get right back to this, just maybe this next week or so. Hopefully we can finish this up very shortly. But thank you for tuning in again, and we'll hope to be back with you soon.